Hi, welcome to the Dunhill Medical Trust Capability Development Programme. You've already had the introduction, but we're going to introduce you to the RISE framework. I'm Mark Salway, used to work for Moore Kingston Smith, and Sarah and myself have developed this, if you like, over 8 or 9 years.
That's right, yeah. So I'm Sarah Ramsey from Wings and Roots. We both love helping organisations move and evolve and help them move forward to have greater impact and to be more sustainable. So yeah, we're looking forward to introducing the RISE framework today.
Cool. So about 8 or 9 years ago, Sarah and myself saw 50% of organisations coming to us and saying, we can't survive for the future. But as you started to explore, you saw actually it was about, if you like, reimagining for the future. Equally, 50% came and said, look, we're fine, we're stable now, but if we don't reimagine, we got a real problem. And that led them back into business models and being sustainable. So we've kind of bolted on efficiency, impact, and put people right at the heart of this. And then specifically for Dunhill, we've included research. And that's the RISE framework we're going to take you through. So it's a blend of all of those things.
This program is really designed for the world we live in at the right now. It's complex. There's a lot of uncertainty out there. Uncertainty is something we talk about a lot in this course, and it's really, I think, about looking at what's unknown within your world, what's known, and what are the possibilities and the opportunities for moving ahead as well. So really looking at the future and kind of helping to sort of guide your organisation forward through that. We're wanting to create positive change, and so it's a way of how do we move forwards together. So the programme we're going to talk about, Mark mentioned earlier, we tend to find on these programs, people sort of about half are looking at building financial sustainability. Others, the other half are looking at reimagining and what does the organisation look like in the future. So interesting for you to reflect where you might sit on that spectrum. It's sort of built recognising that we know that budgets are tight. We've got the cost of living, which is obviously creating challenges, and perhaps also for organisations that are facing a cliff edge up forwards. Perhaps you've got 3 years grant funding that's coming to an end, and it's what happens there and planning for that piece. And as well, we know that for many of your organisations, there's increased demand for services, needs, expectations, aspirations of the people you're trying to help is changing as well. So it's really we'll focus a lot on this through the course and help you adapt for that changing world. We don't look at the organisation just in isolation. Obviously, you're part of an ecosystem, and really sort of exploring how to collaborate more, how to sort of support. So you've got a real thriving ecosystem. So there's an interesting dynamic between collaboration and competition within our sector. So we'll sort of shine a light on that and talk through that. Really, it's about our sort of effort, energy is like what's the biggest levers that we can use to create the change that we're trying to bring. And this whole program is really anchored in evidence and research. Research runs through the heart of this, helping for you to improve the services and also to prove impact as well, to help with funding. And we'll talk as well, people, as Mark mentioned, people are at the heart of this. We'll be talking about how to help bring your organisation forward with everybody in the organisation, from your board and leadership team to all of your staff members as well. So that's very much an area we'll talk about. So as I say, there's 5 components: sustainability, how do we build resilience and agility, responding to opportunities, circumstances that arise; impact, how do we maximise our value for the beneficiaries, what we're all about; how do we do more and better with the resources we've got; the reimagining, both looking at what we're aiming to deliver and also how we're doing it, and as I say, backed with evidence and research. So that's really sort of the 5 building blocks of the RISE framework.
So RISE is about reimagine, impact, sustainability, efficiency, research, and people right at the heart, because you as we've talked about, you can't create change without really understanding leadership, management, culture, people, and also governance. And then the final thing is we call out fundraising separately because it is quite distinct, it's quite different from other business models that you tend to have as organisations. So this is the RISE framework. And as we go through the course, as we go through the programme, we're going to talk about each of these individual areas. And so at the end, you'll have a real understanding, and then you can create an implementation plan to take back to your boards and your management teams to implement for the future. But for me, it's all about asking great questions. I mean, we can build a framework. We can give that to you to actually make, work. But at the same time, if you don't ask great questions, you'll never actually bring the conversations into existence. And it's that vibrancy of the conversations that brings this alive. So here's some great questions, I think. So sustainability, if we think about now versus the future, how do we balance, if you like, beneficiary now and for the future? How do we build that investment so that we're able to create a steady level of delivery all the way through? Impact, we've always got this tension between, the money and the change we create, the social value we create. How do we balance this off in our head and heart? Yeah. Efficiency, do you have an investment mindset? Do you actually invest for the future? What about your infrastructure? Are you investing enough in that? Reimagining. Do you reimagine products and services because it's right for beneficiaries? It's right to have a greater impact for the future. And what about things like digital disruption? What about things like, government grants? What about things like, integrated care systems? How are you responding to those opportunities? And then the final thing here on the page, research. How can you take better evidence-informed decisions? What do you need to do as an organisation to get there? So let's take a step back. The RISE framework is actually quite simple. It's a framework to look at your organisation. And once you've kind of looked at all of these, facets of your organisation, you can see the three big questions, let's say, you're trying to solve. Yeah. And that will help you for the future. So I'm going to start us on the journey then talking about RISE. I'm going to start us on the journey talking about complexity here, if you like. And I'm going to start with the elephant in the room. Social impact versus money. It's really interesting. People think that we can balance this head and heart off. In other words, maybe we can balance the money and the social purpose. What we're seeing from a lot of research at the moment is that maybe you can't balance that off. So you need to think separately about the money and how do you become sustainable there, versus the impact, and how do you maximize that for the beneficiaries you serve. And within that, you might want to think about older people. You might want to think about their families, their communities, and those with special needs, i.e. disability. There's lots of stakeholder groups within that, yeah? And so managing, if you like, the impact and maximizing impact and maximizing sustainability is what you're trying to achieve. So you're not only there now, but you're also there for the future. So with this in mind, and this balance between impact or social value and the money, let's start exploring each of the RISE components. So we're going to start with impact.
Within the programme, we're going to focus in on impact measurement. So both how can you measure impact to sort of understand the impact you're having, to trial, to test, to learn and to develop. And also, how do you then show the impact that you're providing for funders and to increase support for the work that you do? So you can see within inputs and outputs, really trying to sort of go to the next level of how do you measure the outcomes and the impact that you're having, and understanding your contribution to that as well. So there'll be a session specifically focused on that to talk through how you might want to measure and considerations for that will help you on the way. If we talk about the S for sustainability, the finance session will really talk through about looking at your finances with a whole sort of fresh lens, looking at your income and expenditure to really understand how that balances. How do they measure? Is there a funding gap between the two? And sort of looking from the income and expenditure through to the assets. Are you making the most of them? How does your balance sheet look? How's your balance of unrestricted and restricted funds? What are you holding in reserves? Is it the right amount? Does that make sense? Are you using them to invest in the right way while managing your risk and managing your resilience? And right in the middle of the two, holding that together, cash is king, understanding your cash flow. Perhaps some of your payments are in arrears and you're paying areas in advance. So really looking at the whole big picture of there to understand it. So you're really maximizing your money and your funds, and understanding how you can improve the whole picture for sort of smoother flow of the organisation and to help you grow. Also looking, what can be a really useful lens is to understanding where do you sit as far as growth, and where are you on that maturity life stage. So starting at your stage 1, where you're really sort of responding and stabilizing, perhaps looking, most of your money's been spent on that service delivery and you've got a supporting infrastructure, but perhaps there's a funding gap. So it's really important sort of as a base to understand what that gap is and where that is, and then start looking at particular different ways that you might want to fill that, whether that's through better cost recovery, whether that's through more sort of trading, social enterprise types activities, whether there's a hybrid between those. So the second stage is to start investing in fundraising and how to fund that gap. And of course, there's a lag time for that, where you're going to be investing, and and you won't get that back until you finally get to that maturity where you've got a balanced, sustainable model where your income and your revenue streams meet your costs. So we'll be talking specifically about different areas. So depending on the type of organisation you are and your funding, how do you blend those models to get a good overall sort of diverse and sustainable picture?
So Sarah's talked through the first two components of RISE. Impact, that change that's attributable to you, and secondly, sustainability. How do you create financial sustainability for the future? I'm going to take you through the final two components. The third is efficiency. And efficiency is, if you like, quite complex. You have to think in quite a number of different directions. People start talking about value for money, and value for money can be about the effectiveness of your organization. In other words, do you make a change? It can be about economy. Do you purchase in the right way? Do you buy things in the best way and also at the cheapest price? And equity, do you actually do you work so that you treat all stakeholder groups the same? But when it fundamentally comes down to it, it's often about efficiency and actually how you use resources and how you maximize the change and the work that you do for the minimum resources. Yeah. So this is what we're going to talk through now. We're going to focus on this efficiency piece, and we're going to talk about first the infrastructure you have as organizations. Working with a lot of organizations, we tend to find that infrastructure hasn't been invested in. It's not built into budgets for the future, and therefore tends to be underinvested. Even we've seen in some type of starvation cycle sometimes where people aren't investing, therefore can't grow for the future. It links then into the investment-focused mindset you might have. I mean, do you spend enough, if you like, for the future from your reserves to really help create a sustainable organization? Or if not, how are you going to build that? Efficiency is also about staff. I mean, do they have a voice? They're quite often able to see what change is needed, and especially staff and beneficiaries, you put that together, it's quite powerful. But in terms of outsourcing, in terms of procurement, maybe you want to focus on that to drive greater efficiency, or you want to benchmark yourself against other organizations to see how you're doing. One of the things that we've worked on quite a lot is shared back office functions, in other words, sharing with other organizations. And that might not just be finance and IT, it might be, for example, a fundraising person, giving you the expertise you need to be able to do fundraising properly. And then the final thing is something I really believe in, which is, do you give yourself time to think? Without it, you really can't think about efficiency. In other words, are you mindful or mindful? In other words, your mind is just completely full all the time. So the third bit of RISE is really focusing on efficiency and doing the most you can with your resources, which then leads us through to the final slide, if you like, the final bit of this, which is reimagining. And reimagining could be, as you see on the right-hand side, about digital disruption, artificial intelligence, integrated care systems. In other words, the environment you have at the moment. Reimagining could be about working better with others, in other words, with collaboration or partnership. But you've always got to keep focused on impact. You've always got to keep focused on the change that you are creating. And a lot of organizations we're working with at the moment, for example, are saying, we're going to set up a social enterprise. Yeah, we're going to set up a social enterprise. What does that create? What impact does it create? Will it eventually actually just take more of your resources and more of your time? So maybe it's not a good idea after all. So there's challenges with reimagining. But overall, if we think about this in a coordinated way, and also we give ourselves time to think, we can really create change for our organizations. So that's it. We've gone through the key, Sarah and myself have gone through the key elements of RISE. We've talked about people at its heart. We've talked about research and why that's absolutely critical. And our University of Birmingham colleagues are going to do a separate video on that. And we just want you to come, learn, but also collaborate with us and come and build a network. Come and talk, come and share your experience so that we can all become greater off the back of that. Dunhill and the collaborative program that we're setting up, the capability development program, is right for you, I hope. Come and join us.